Welcome everyone to the whatever the number of times we've had an baseline protocol SSC call. Next 10 minutes are just highlighting upcoming work. And I think as we've discussed on previous calls, the ideal thing for both the CSC and the SSC is on these regular meetings, it's good to be sort of like a sitcom, right? You know, everybody should know when to laugh. There's a format. It's sort of like McDonald's. You always know what you're going to get. That's sort of the goal here, and we're going to try to do that this time. This will be our first time for really doing that. So new members and attendees in the beginning, just for 10 minutes. 10 minutes we'll highlight work that's notable that's about to be announced or upcoming. And then 30 minutes we'll be establishing sort of the items that are shiny objects and that are that we should be focusing on for high prioritization in the coming weeks. The current track has been SAP Dynamics integration as sort of the big shiny object, something everybody can get around. That doesn't mean lots of other work isn't getting done. In fact, in the last few weeks, lots of different kinds of work has been getting done. A lot of it is getting to the point where I don't even know what it all is. So that's usually a good sign of healthiness for a community like this when you can't keep track of it all. So the only thing we can do in a community the size of this, which is now, I think, hitting the 500 mark. I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but it was moving there last I checked. I think we're still growing significantly on like stars on GitHub and forks and stuff like that. So it's pretty remarkable. Even Slack, which usually takes a taper off and goes down after a major announcement, has just been going up and up and up. So the daily users have been going up, activity's been going up, everything's been going up. So the highlights for we'll go through are really just to say, hey, there's lots of things going on. Here's some unifying things that we're all going to be about, because these are the things that we think as a group will move the community forward, tell the right story, show a progression, so show momentum. So the three things have been the SAP Dynamics Systems of Record integration for the demo, the Radish 34 demo. That's about to be released, and the press release has been effectively drafted. Now we just have to buff it out and get it into the press system sometime at the end of this week. The second thing was specifications, and the third thing was use cases. And thanks to our friends at the Mainnet Working Group, we have about 22 survey responses on what the enterprise use cases are around using the public mainnet and what the challenges are. I'd like to see some more work done there, but at least now we sort of see a picture emerging of what people want to use this stuff for. And sure enough, workflow integration is high on the list. So I guess we're on the right track. I'll pause there and say, and ask if let's see, do we have any of the team that worked on the SAP Dynamics integration on the call? It's a largely TSC activity.
Dan and Jason.
Yes, we do. We got Daniel and we got George.
I'm a little bit lagging behind, so I'm going to leave it to Dan, and I'm going to tell you what I'm doing on top of this later.
Sweet.
Or after Dan.
Sure. Hey guys, how are you?
Just a couple minutes, Dan, on it. I know everybody, we're going to see the announcement soon. So,
yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of try to recap the whole thing from all different sides, right? So Unibright and Provide work together and put together with what's called the Unibright proxy, and that's also going to be leveraging something that Provide put out called the Provide Goldmine, which is really sweet. I mean, just super quickly, basically what that does is, if you're using an ERP, let's just say from the dynamic side, which is what we are in the middle of the configuration for, all we need to do is send the messages to the UB proxy, which is just a series of API calls, gets, posts, all those things, and uses the Provide Goldmine to handle all that fun stuff that nobody really wants to see, key management and wallet management and all those other things, right? So it's really providing a really great back end service, which is then using the Radish 34 containers with, I think we counted them out. There's like 18 or 17 of them, different things that are just running in the background. But the key is, right, to make sure that organizations that are using their legacy systems could just continue to use their legacy systems, as the, user adoption and change management is something that weighs extremely heavily. So, just really happy that this is really coming to fruition from our side with the Dynamics 365 plugin. It's basically, the modules are basically configured, and we should be ready to present the full demo here from our side by the end of the week.
I think we're going to announce it, sort of pre-announce it on at the consensus thing Paul and I are doing tomorrow, at whatever time we're doing, mid-afternoon Eastern time.
Can I take some minutes to follow up on what Dan said with some more things that are coming?
Yes, so please.
Absolutely, thank you. So Unibright and Envision and Provide are obviously leading the way there with the ERPs. We at LimeChain have been working closely with Kyle of Provide, of trying something that's very interesting, a little bit out of the box, but I think it's going to be interesting for the SSC people here. So it all came from a brief chat of my contact of mine that is into the manufacturing business, but is somewhat a smaller player. So what he told me, gave me an insight in normally around supply chain stuff, is that yes, you have some bigger players that do a lot of stuff and they have their bigger ERPs, but a lot of these actually have a lot smaller, more niche manufacturers for more niche things. And these smaller manufacturers normally are not always having these big, costly ERP systems. Some of them actually use a tool called Microsoft Excel or Google Spreadsheets to actually manage their day-to-day operations. I mean, they just have several sheets, they're connected together. They say, hey, I do one thing, so I have several orders, I have several things. I mean, I don't need more than Excel. I don't need to pay the license fees there.
Everybody's favorite database, right?
Absolutely. I mean, everything is like Excel is the database and the ERP of these companies. So essentially what you have there is around every bigger company, you have lots of companies that are smaller, that they have these Excel local based ERPs there. And in order for us to actually drive maximum value, it's important. I mean, these connections between smaller vendor and bigger vendor are as important as connection between bigger vendor and bigger vendor, where the two ERPs are going to talk together. So what I have been doing over the past week, I've been hacking around actually a Google Spreadsheets add-on that is essentially acting as baseline client, where you can, I have made it being able to receive, again, from the Unibright proxy, as Dan said, being able to receive baseline RFPs with everything that's there, and being able to actually write in your Excel, hey, my proposal against this RFP is this, and being able to click a button which essentially sends this data back to the baseline. So I am currently baselining Excel, if this makes sense. And with Kyle Provide, we're also talking about DocuSign integration, which is something very interesting that is, again, probably should be coming in the coming weeks. Just, yeah, wanted to let you know that lagging a little bit behind what Dan and the Unibright people are coming. Also, I'm doing currently a proof of concept add-on for spreadsheets, where you can also add people that are smaller and just have spreadsheets.
When's the VisiCalc port coming? That's what I want.
Well,
that's an old joke.
One by one, drop by drop.
Right. Well, it's that's a great example of some sparkly things that are going on. Also, I don't think Kyle's here. And by the way, we should all give a golf clap to Kyle and Provide. That's a great example of a small company stepping up and doing big things in the community, leveraging the community. It's a exemplary model, and I hope that other small companies follow it and do as well as Kyle's doing in the team. I mean, and it's nice to see that the work is quality, right? That there's a lot of people looking at it and saying, hey, this little company is doing quality work. So let's see more of that. And obviously LimeChain is following from that. So is Envision. The next thing that's on the agenda. So those are two things. Kyle from Provide is also working on a DocuSign implementation. So integrating that and showing a fast sort of low cost deployment system for small companies. So if you're aware, 30% of some of the largest companies, I see Karen's here from BP, I bet she's familiar with this, 30% of your trading partners or your suppliers or buyers do not enough volume to warrant setting up large systems of middleware to join your systems. 30%, even among the biggest companies. So how do you get those smaller volume partners into a state of consistency with your system of record? We told a story about that, and Kyle got on it, and he's working on that. Where every time you have something, a digital signature like a DocuSign to sign for a piece of procurement or what have you, you'd be able to just click, and then it would say, hey, do you have a system of record? You say, what's the system of record? I'm a radish farmer. And you say, yeah, well, for $9.95 a month, you can have a system that will make your partners more comfortable working with you. So those kinds of things are exciting, especially jacking into the DocuSign API. Anything else? Any other sparkly things that we want to talk about? I think we have 1 minute left on that subject. 2 minutes, actually. Anybody want to bring up something good that they're working on? Okay, so let's get into the meat of the call, which is, or I'll share screen. And screen. And here's our baseline roadmap. Everybody familiar with this at this point? Is anybody having trouble getting in? Please, if you don't want to take up time on the call, please put something in chat saying I'm having trouble getting into this. Anybody on the SSC should have this. This is kind of this single piece of paper that we all work from. And hopefully it'll make it, make our job on the calls pretty straightforward. So I'm gonna collapse these. These are the main project level buckets that we have identified as things to unify around. Now they will change, and you might be looking at these right now and saying, hey, we're missing one, or why are you calling this one that, or these two things are redundant. That's great. That's exactly what we're here for. Decide, say that. But let me just enumerate them real quickly. Deployment and operations, POCs and demos, documentation, specifications, marketing and comms, community organization, tools, security, integrations generally, and key components. So a couple of notes on this. Specifications are about the writing of our specifications. So those are, you'll see in here standards preamble, some synchronization between EEA and ourselves, online component standards, on-chain component standards, off-chain component standards, et cetera. And this should govern the work of getting standards into our specification sheet, which is right here. Oops, specification steering committee, standards. So there's not a lot here yet, because that's what we're working on. As we grow, as we get these things done, this will start to populate more. And then we'll get all that over into the OASIS tool and into other standards bodies like the EEA.
John, who oversees the specification work?
Well, that's a very good question. That's something that we're actively looking for, is somebody to be accountable for that particular part of the work.
Okay. I have been writing several specifications around the baseline CLI toolings for administrators, and I just was wondering whether these should also be included there. Although these are more like a requirement specification for how this to be developed.
You're exactly right on, and be careful, or you're going to find yourself on this list of things to. So no, I would love to talk more about that. And we have no shortage of people who have deep experience in specifications. But we're waiting for somebody, and honestly, this one can wait a bit because we have some things to do before that one gets into full operation. You have to know the context around which you're standardizing, and I think that's kind of what we're doing right now. So that I think we'll get pregnant with that at some point here, and then specifications are going to start to flow. And at that point, we really do need to have somebody who's sort of the czar of specifications that's driving things forward. And we do not have the accountable person. We have lots of people to be consulted, lots of people that can provide advice and guidance. Oasis itself is extremely good at this stuff. And they have a whole committee that has stepped up to help us on this, but we do need that one person who's going to be accountable for it. And I will say that if nobody else shows up for it, I will take it on because it's incredibly important. But I'd like to see somebody specialize. All right. So in the POCs and demos, let's see a chat here real quick. Chief editor, yes. That's right. So we need somebody who's kind of the chief editor. POCs and demos, as we said, we have this baseline SAP Dynamics demo, which is just about to be complete, and we can sign that off. There's a hackathon going on that completes on the 15th, I think, of March around COVID-19. Balaji Chetty-Pachai and others have been working on this with guidance from some folks in Consensus Health and elsewhere. And that will get judged by Vitalik Buterin and Joe Lubin and other notables. So that's going to be kind of exciting. And then, as I said, there's this coming up. Actually, this is wrong. This should be out to June, to end of May. I know that there are folks working on an invoice workflow demo where we take it from take things from MSA to PO, and then obviously the next thing is invoice, and in between invoice and PO, and there's also opportunities to do other workflow steps like inventory management, shipping, pallet management, all these kinds of workflow steps. So that could be, and this is something that we should discuss as a team kind of right now, is what is the next thing? If we've just shown SAP, two systems of record, venerable ones like SAP and Dynamics, integrating through baselining. What's the next big thing that people need to see to say, oh yeah, I get this. I see where this is going. I'm going to pause for 7 seconds, make people uncomfortable until somebody says something.
Spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets. All right, no, that's legit. So yes, I mean that'd be kind of a wake up call, right? Hey, you can even integrate a spreadsheet with this, right? That is, I was quite excited when you told me about that, George. So spreadsheet integration. And by the way, George, I put a integration item down here. You'll see Excel integration kit. You might want to call it spreadsheet integration kit, but you should have control of that. And again, okay, if you've got ZenHub loaded up and you've got your GitHub ID loaded up in here, you should have full write access to take control of that particular item.
I have it. Yeah.
It would be great if you could wire that high level epic down into your actual issues in the baseline repo.
Okay.
Right on.
So, hey, John, and maybe I cannot specifically call out one, but maybe more generalized, I think something that really truly shows a multi-party use case beyond what we at least only just saw so far with Radish on this RFP process, right? So I think truly, really, a multi-party, incentive to keep a data structure in sync, right? And maybe the other one to add is really sort of legally defendable kind of events. And I think that points to decentralized identity and the mechanisms associated with distributed PKI using these signatures actually as business signatures.
Yes, I'm writing this down. In fact, this is something I needed to have in here before. Identity. I'm just going to put identity in here. Corp identity. One of the companies that has joined us on the call is, Brad, you might want to, is very into identity.
Yeah, John, this is Mike from Everest. I was just going to jump in and say tracking identity of suppliers in this solution is what we were going to propose working on.
Would you like to think of this as an integration, or as, we could write right here, POCs and demos. We could have a demo for integrating with, with your particular platform, or we could, obviously, and the nice thing about the way this works is you can have epics that roll up into epics, and have issues connected to each of those. And it's sort of multiple inheritance. And if you have an epic that goes into the identity box, it can also go into a demo box and into some other things, and we can track them.
Yeah, I was to say it should be a key component and then also part of the demo.
So you're thinking we should have a demo for identity, I won't do it now, but well, do you have access at this point? I think I gave you.
I believe I do. I will verify after this call.
All right, so I'm going to take it.
It might also fall actually into specifications first, right? Like conceivably, we would start looking into did VC templates and schemas and things, and then maybe into handshakes, right? Like which challenging protocol are we using, right? Data of Jose or Ditcom or whatever, right? So I think there is a bunch of specification talks we have had over it before we get into the componentry of it.
Well,
yes.
when you say specifications, can you expand upon that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, that's the standard aspect of it, right? I mean, we can say date VCs and have wallets that do these things, but if we don't agree on, say, maybe even TCR or some registries out there that show, here are, the lists of, accredited verifiers or issuers. And I mean, all the things that comes with it needs to be standardized. Otherwise, it's just back to balkanization, just on the same blockchain, right? So that's why.
Yeah, there's, the reason I bring it up is that we're compliant with the specifications for organizational verifiable identities, which is called GLIFE, which is the legal entity identifier system that was created after the 2008 meltdown. So we're actually going into organizations at KYC level, like know your customer financial regulatory level. So these are verified identities. These aren't claims. Okay, and that's a pretty big difference. If I'm IBM and I'm sourcing silicon from somebody, I want to know who that person is that I'm sourcing it from. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. What I say, I think the electronic digital, layer underneath, right, needs to have a specification to be interoperable, right? So, yeah.
No, I agree with that, but I do want to point out that we need to reach out to the wider universe for the verification aspects.
Very well. And great conversation about that. I'm just trying to capture some of it. And yeah, Everest, I'm not sure I can find, I'm not getting your IDs in here, so I can't assign you this project.
It should be in there. Hold on just a sec.
What's your GitHub ID?
Bradley JW.
No. No, but we'll figure that out later. Okay.
Yep.
I'm putting Stefan in there again. This is accountability. This is not about doing stuff. And Stefan, you seem to be a stakeholder in this, so I'll put you in there just to keep you in the loop. But yeah, let's see that we can get that after the call. Right. So multi-party use case I also put down there. So I will follow up with folks, but it would be great as I followed up with you that I discovered that you've already taken action and you've gotten in there and started wiring these things up. As you probably, just in case anybody doesn't know, we've created a new repo, which doesn't clutter up the baseline repo. And it's called baseline-roadmap. And as you may know, ZenHub allows you to create these work groups with multiple repos in it. So you'll see this has both the baseline roadmap and the baseline repo in it. And these are all the things. I'm talking with the maintainers and the contributors either today or tomorrow. And I think Brian's on the call. We want to get this into a state where we are now moving up the maturity model into having, some kind of pipelining that makes sense for a community like this. And what are we going to do with milestones and deliverable or the notion of releases isn't precise in this environment, but we have those tools that are at hand. So we got to decide what to do with it so that we can know how to move something from a new epic or a new issue into other pipelines. Yeah.
This is John Monarch with ShipChain. Just wanted to jump in on one since we talked about spreadsheets. Another unfortunately outdated format that is widely used in enterprise that's probably going to be necessary as an intake here is EDI.
Yes, that's a great point. And in fact, why don't we just get that again? This is now that we have this repo. Why don't we get that down? I'm going to call it an EDI integration. Now, strictly speaking, John, wouldn't you say? I mean, EDI is a messaging format, right? It's about codes for documents, right? So POC XYZ is EDI document number 6525, whatever, and it's not so much a system of record as a way of making sure you have proper codes on your documents, regardless of system of record. Would you say correct?
Right, and going by to the different EDI standards specifically, so what is it, X22, I believe, along with Edifact. It's going to have some different messaging and different requirements for each, but it will go with the procurement flow and the invoicing flow and the general confirmation flow that goes with a lot of the ERP integrations as well.
Yeah, big time. So I'm going to put a placeholder here under integrations called EDI integration kit GS1 X22. And put that here, and let's see if it starts to attract accountability people.
Yeah, and I want to second that. Obviously, what I mentioned last time, right? That's I'm still behind, kind of responding to the comments people made. EDI, I think, is an important part in this B2B space, but I think we have to be a bit more daring there, and not just call it integration, but perhaps also call it replacement. And I don't mean the format, the messaging format, John. I think, it's actually what you have to look in is, the party consensus in EDI. It's point to point, right?
Right.
When you look these formats, data over confirmation back. When you look how POs are actually taken from the receiver, that they are being sent to a seller, and that's taken as the ordering, right? So I think when you take the the EDI, point-to-point format into multi-party use cases, you look at something that EDI cannot do, right? And I think that's the opportunity, right? So.
Yes. So if what I'm taking from what you're saying is there's a progression to this.
Mm-hmm.
The multi-party thing you were just multi-party requirement probably goes before the EDI stuff, right? And Arwen will remember early in the piece when we were working on Radish that we said that this is sort of like multi-party EDI, that we're, it's not like you would get rid of EDI coding. In fact, you'd probably use it a lot extensively, but you would use it, but combining that with a baselining approach would allow you to do more interesting things with EDI, in particular multi-party, not so much point-to-point, et cetera, et cetera.
And state, right? I mean, the state in the middle of the pipe, right? Is interesting.
So I don't know what the ordering of this is, but you've got this legal and identity. So these things we've just been talking about. Just checking time. Yeah, we're good. Legal, identity, multi-party, legal, identity. And if we had demos and integrations or whatever work we're doing around this to put some meat on the bones of these things, presumably in some grouping, they all kind of would go before an EDI demo. Would you say that's correct? So I don't know if this is 1, 2, 3 in terms of prioritization, or if it's 1, 2, 3, but whatever these are, you'd want to do all of them before we did a big EDI thing. So I wonder if the EDI might be a thing for the summer or fall. And these would be, one of these or more of them would be things that we'd go after right away.
Or maybe there is a circle underneath that EDI bubble that sort of says, what if we take baseline or just more generalized that web of state, right, as underneath, and put these 3 points with arrows to it, and then compare these 2 bubbles, I think is a healthy sort of exercise to make, if that makes sense.
Yes, and correct me if I transcribed that in my head wrong, but what that means to me is another way to think of this is not an EDI demo, but EDI as the how for everything else we're doing.
Yeah, and help it to become better, right? Yeah.
I will say that if that's going to happen, then we do have a piece of work still that is, I would call it the EDI kit. Not everybody understands how to work with EDI. So if for example, the Provide project or the one that we just did should have had EDI encoding in it, that obviously didn't happen. And it didn't happen because the people involved with it, were focused on other things and didn't have sort of a quickie way of getting EDI into it. So even so, we probably need some work here, correct?
Doing EDI as the flow would probably allow for kind of a backwards compatibility with a lot of systems we may not focus on as well. So, I mean, with like a direct SAP or Dynamics or, Salesforce or Oracle integration, those are the big players, but there's a lot of small like EDI systems out there that, tier 2 supplier warehouses might use that they've been using for 30 years, and it would allow them to join in rather than just, being on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Well spoken. Exactly. That's that opening.
I won't lie, John. I mean, you know a heck of a lot about this stuff. If your team can provide some leadership here, it'd be great. Arwen's team also very good with EDI, with their ops chain project. So, between us, there's several companies that know a lot about EDI. Be great to have some leadership there and make sure that this gets done. So that one of the things I'll be watching for is how many things do we talk about that just go no further than what we talk about. I think it's okay for some of things to just not, we talk about them and they don't go anywhere, and maybe they come back later. But if everything we do is talk and then we don't see any progress later, then that'll be unhealthy. So far, we've seen a lot of progress. So we're good there, but I think it's always about accountability. All right, so multi-party legal identity. I think here we already have work happening with the DocuSign thing. Identity, well, we've got a great identity team already coming in, so let's see if that can rev up. I would argue that multi-party is next after these two, right? Does that seem right? So if we said legal and other integrations like the spreadsheet thing, that's going to be pretty shiny. And do we think that we need to show another integration, or does Dynamics and SAP make the point enough for vendors to now get behind that and start doing their own work on that? Do we need to see it like an Oracle integration to get them excited?
I think Oracle, meaning the database ERP system company,
yes,
will be valuable because that's certainly out there. But I would also suggest that maybe the smaller ones like Wix and Weebly, and I mean all these things were small businesses use for their web presence that have a little bit of CRM in it, a little bit of ordering and things like that, might be also an interesting place to go.
More than working things out on this call, I think this is about highlighting what things we can work out after the call. And I think that makes sense, right? So put a bunch of stuff here, and over the course of the week, it'd be great if more things got popped in here, and if more things got pruned or modified so that they're higher value. Brian pointed out, Chamberlain, and I think he's right. This is not precisely, this isn't a roadmap. The roadmap view shows things that are on a timeline. Some of these items will never complete. They're topics. But I think it's still kind of useful to see where things are along it. So you can go into the POCs and demos and see kind of what each bit of that is in terms of its time frame. Although some of these things will have no end to them because they're just long-running topics. Specifications aren't really ready yet. We'll say marketing and comms. This last week was a big week. This is a big week. The EY event was a big week before that. Doing lots of marketing and comms work. Jack, would you like to say anything about that?
Hi, John. Yeah, we're trying to get more news out for baseline. And I'm also hoping that everyone in this call is spreading the word. And yeah, that would help a lot. And yeah, we are helping Jory with some other volunteers to spread the word, making short movies, that kind of things. So if there are bigger companies with people from marketing or PR who can help us, just join. I think that was it, John.
Yeah, well, there'll be consensus this week. There's going to be a press release going out regarding the SAP Dynamics integration. Whether that goes out in the form of a blog style press release or a proper AP wire press release is still being worked. Jory, we might want to talk to the Oasis team about that. I'm going to bring in our consensus press team today. Microsoft Dynamics team had a hand in helping with this, although we're just referring to it factually, saying, hey, yeah, this is SAP Dynamics integration. I don't think we need to go through necessarily any particular SAP or Dynamics PR team for it, because we're not making claims about their support. We're just saying this was done. That said, we will definitely make sure that folks like York are informed before it goes out and have a chance to make sure that it's tuned correctly for them. I think that's all. There's lots going on with community organization, but we're now into the last segment, so I'll stop sharing. Does anybody see anything that's a gross missing? Anything that's missing that ought to be here? Just this last call for that. And Stefan, thanks for prompting a good conversation about that. Okay. Please, please, everybody who's on the SSC and anybody who's accountable is on the SSC. You know, it doesn't really take a lot to get on the SSC other than being accountable for something. If you're on that and you don't have access to this, reach out to me, please, in the next couple of days. I'll get you fixed up, onboarded, educated, and you can use the tool. You have full access to it. And it's free and pretty easy to use once you get in there. If you're not, you know, and if you're not in here, if you're not in the membership, then nobody can assign you to anything either. So I tripped up on at least one of those today. So please reach out to me, make sure that you're set up. And please jump in here and add stuff, modify stuff, change stuff, even delete stuff as long as you're you know, communicating those deletions to others.
John, just maybe on that note, the little procedural question. So are we then taking the vetting and discussion process to Slack, or do we just leave it undefined and let people find each other, or what are any thoughts there?
I'm waiting to see if anybody jumps in on that. It's an interesting question. Yeah, I think Stefan, there's two ways to go, right? We can, or multiple ways, I guess, but the two obvious ones are just to let them be organic. The SAP Dynamics one was very organic. George and Daniel and folk will tell you. As we mature, we might put down some guidelines for that sort of thing, like how, you know, who gets credited for what, under what conditions, why, you want to make sure that people get credited for the work, but you also don't want to, you know, if somebody does 100% of the work or 99% of the work and somebody else does 1%, then how do you work that out equitably? So we can get sophisticated there. My general perspective is if somebody helped in any way, they get on the list. And we approach it from a teamwork perspective, right? Everybody's on the team. So there's things like that. The other way to go is to, set up some kind of structure for creating, you know, projects out of this. Obviously, the simplest one is the epics themselves, right? So you can start to organize people around the big epics. And I'll remind everyone that the way we do this is we use a single epic. So we can go into here and say baselining an IoT. And then we could either use this one or create a new sub epic underneath this one for some specific piece of work. But in this one, we could just simply start editing and writing all the specifications for what we'd like to see. Is this a sprint? Is this a spike, a research spike? Is this an actual piece of work? And you use the one epic until it becomes sort of ready to turn into a bunch of tasks and issues and that sort of thing. And that way you can kind of unify a community around a particular project, and then it'll start to divide and become specific. You know, there'll be specific tasks and stories and that sort of thing underneath it. So I guess the simplest answer is let's use the epics for organizing, you know, groups of similar interests. So if you said, hey, if you wanted to get people around the idea of baselining an IoT, you know, you would start slacking. You get on Slack or on the community channels and say, hey, go to number 53. Let's start working from there. That's our single piece of paper. Does that seem right to you, Stefan?
That sounds right to me. Yeah.
I'm going to stop sharing. And you've all witnessed now the first sort of standard structure. I think the things that we didn't cover, is everyone clear on their responsibilities as accountable parties, and are we missing any large part? I think we actually did cover those in the conversation. So I think we did cover the agenda. Everybody, thanks a lot. We'll see you in 2 weeks. 11 a.m. on Mondays, every other Monday. See y'all.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Hey, Brad, real quick, I did drop a link to the Slack there. Okay, cool. So you should be able to join, but email me if you can't get in for some reason.
Thanks very much, Troy.
All right, bye.
Have a great day.